Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I am back with a rainy day bokeh painting. So the first thing before I start is I glaze the canvas in portrait tone. So this is supposed to help with to brighten up the colors when you paint over it instead of white. Once the paint is dry, then I sketch out the landscape with a chalk. Since I always find a blank canvas a little bit intimidating, I always like to map out my colors by just painting a very thin layer over it first so I get a rough idea of how the finished painting will look like. For this part, I forgot to press the record button, so we're just kind of a few steps ahead, but it's okay. So what I'm doing is for the sky, I'm using sky blue on the left side, and I slowly go darker by adding ultramarine blue and Prussian blue on the right side of the canvas. In the middle is this ambiguous shape across the canvas, which are supposed to be like trees or mountains by the side of the highway, and I'm painting that in Mars black. And then for the road, it's pretty much the same colors because it's kind of like reflective of the sky. I'm using Prussian blue and a little bit of sky blue on the left side of the canvas. And then for the shape of the car, on the right side of the canvas, I leave it in gray. Once the first layer is done, I go in again with the paintbrush for the second layer. It looks a bit hideous right now, but you just gotta trust the process. And I find that by going layers by layers, I'm able to be a bit more flexible with the painting, that I can kind of make changes as I go if I feel that I'm not happy with this part, and then I can add more colors or make it lighter, and it's still much easier to paint over something that's not fully painted yet. Like for example, on the left, I thought I wanted to have this kind of yellowish pinkish glow, but it just looked a little bit odd on my trial second layer, so I just painted it across in sky blue. So this second layer is still not the final form. What I find is sometimes blending with acrylics to get that very smooth finish, you need to go in like the second time and the third time, then you'll have that smooth finish. So for the first layer, I just know my values, like I know which part is dark, which part is light, and then the second layer I go in again with the paintbrush, so it's a little bit darker, it's a little bit more opaque, but it's still not at its final form yet. Now onto the third layer. I still wanted to add a little bit of glow over the horizon on the left side of the canvas, but I knew that the way I wanted it to be earlier wasn't that nice, so this time I'm just kind of making it a little bit more subtle. I'm adding ivory white to sky blue just above those curves, and then I blend it towards sky blue, and then I add more ultramarine blue in the middle, and then I make it much darker on the right side by adding Prussian blue and ultramarine blue. So over here on this part, I focus a bit more on blending on this back and forth motion, now that I'm more confident after the first and second layers. When blending gradients from light to dark, I like to add a little bit of water and kind of go again until everything is smoothly blended. This part is quite easy. I'm just going to paint Mars black for these ambiguous looking shape of the trees by the side of the highway. A lot of people say don't use black, but I actually like to use black in some of my paintings when I want to create a more dramatic contrast. And since this is a night scene and the colors are quite dark from the dark blue, then I think it's okay to have black in so you can tell the difference between the two colors. Onto the road next. I want it to be darker than the sky, not exactly mirroring, but just a bit, just like a shade darker. So I'm starting with Prussian blue first, but I also want to leave this streak of sky blue in the middle of the left side of the canvas, because that's where the lights are going to be shining from this side of the highway. So I blend in the middle with a bit of sky blue, and I just wet my brush and continue to go back and forth just like I did with the sky. So the right side is supposed to be the darker side, and I didn't want it to be so monotonous and just one shade of Prussian blue. So I add a little bit of Payne's Grey to my Prussian blue for the right side to get that beautiful grayish dark blue color. When I'm doing these long strokes, I kind of paint over the car, but that's okay because it's harder to get that seamless blending when you have to stop in between for the car and continue again. So I just paint over the car, and then once I'm satisfied with it, then I redraw the car and paint over it. So this is the next day. What I like to do is I like to break up my paintings, especially when I'm doing so many layers. I like to let the paint dry, and then I come back again the next day with fresh eyes to see if there's any parts that needs to be touched up or not. But over here, what I wanted to do is that I wanted to continue to lighten this part where I said I wanted the glow to be with more ivory white. And then I mix a little bit of pink to the ivory white and just a dash of sky blue so that it blends into the gradient. I have to be careful here because I don't want it to be too bright, but I just want it to be on this section, like this little bit of glow above these trees. Okay, once that is done, now next I want to blur the landscape. I've actually explained this like many times before in like the previous tutorials, but this has always been my favorite part. So I'll need two colors. First is the color of the sky and the color of the shape of these trees, which are just kind of like black. So I need to mix black with ivory white and sky blue. Then you'll get this middle shade, and I'm gonna paint that in the middle of these black lines that's just separated from the sky. And then what I do is I will blend it so that it has this blurry effect to it and the lines are not very obvious. It becomes just one gradient. So this is an up close shot. So as you can see, I'm mixing this gray part in the middle is the birth of two colors, which is ivory white plus sky blue and Mars black. And then I draw it in a line in the middle, and then I just keep blending and blending and blending until there is no visible line, and then it becomes one gradient. You'll need a finer brush for this to really tap into the lines and kind of manually blend it out so it becomes one gradient. So I swapped out my flat white brush to a size 00 brush. So I repeat this process until this whole part is kind of blended out, or rather blurred out. So I just remember you have to match the shade. So as I go darker, then I use the darker shade of the blue, which will be soon from sky blue to ultramarine blue, then to Prussian blue mixed with black. When you're doing this blurring effect thing, it's actually a lot easier when you do it on darker colors compared to lighter colors, because it wouldn't be as obvious, but it'll still look blurred enough. Then I repeat this as well for the car. I want this to be just a very vague shape of the car, because it's going to be a blurry background through the rain. So it doesn't have to be sharp. Make sure that all corners are rounded, but never leave like sharp angular corners. And then continue this blending process until this is done as well. Next, I just want to add a little bit more yellow because there's going to be yellow lights there. So I just add a bit of Naples yellow over this lines there. And then now is the fun part. I'm going to add the bokeh circles. So the bokeh circles on this side of the canvas, on the left side, are primarily going to be white, yellow, and orange. And then I remembered that I wanted it to be a wet ground. So I'm using a wool brush, and I just dab it into orange yellow, and I just glaze the canvas, just a light layer, a thin layer, and then I drag the paint downwards. And then after that I add orange just to brighten it a little bit more, and then I continue to do that glazing thing back and forth, and I continue to drag the paint downwards. Now because of the orange streak down there, I wanted to kind of match it a little bit, so to add this warmer shade on top of the sky, and I just add a bit more orange down there because I'll be adding more orange lights. On this side of the road, the traffic's gonna be heading towards us, which means that the headlights are gonna be in white or just a tint of yellow. So to indicate that, I draw the circles together. So each pair of circles would represent one car. But since the road is wet, which means that the lights are reflective of the wet ground, so I draw the circles, 2 more circles below each circles, and then I drag the paint down. So I wanted the reflected lights to be a bit more yellow, so I add Naples yellow and titanium white, whereas the headlights on top would be in titanium white. Once that part is done, I continue to add a little bit more circles on the right side of the canvas, but I wanted this side to be a bit more plainer. But on this side, because the car is hitting the other way, I'm going to paint it more in red or orange, just maybe like one or two white circles and a little bit of turquoise circles to mix it up a little bit. When it comes to bokeh, interpreting it's a lot about memory. Like this green lights could just be part of a billboard or maybe traffic lights at the end of the road. And all these red lights could be cars going by, brake lights. So you do not have to be too exact about it. For the cars or the lights that are meant to be on the road, I drag it downwards because the floor is supposed to be wet. So once I have placed all my circles, I paint it again, the second layer, because sometimes the white isn't opaque enough, and then you'll have to paint about 2 or 3 times so that it becomes solid. Throughout the whole painting, this patch of white lights are actually my favorite part. I actually like the streaky watery effect when you drag the paint downwards. So this part's quite easy, so I'm not going to ramble on, and I'll probably fast forward this to the next step because this video is getting a bit longer than I expected it to be. Okay, once you've touched up all the other bokeh circles, then we're going to move on to the next step. I'm using a size 000 brush here, and I'm going to just kind of make little dots around these bokeh circles. So if they are white, I just put just white dots around it, and if it's red, I put the red dots around it, and if it's yellow, then I do yellow. But not too much, just around the circles, because I was trying to create this effect where when you're looking through the windshield and it's wet, then you have all these specks of lights that are like reflections from the water drops. And then I repeat this step until every bokeh circle or every source of light has these little dots around it. So I've got to be frank with you, this is actually my first time trying this technique as well, so I'm really hoping that it would work out. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I can salvage this painting. Once I'm done with all this dotting around the circles, then I want to add more micro raindrops across the whole canvas. On the top part, I'm using sky blue. So what I do is I add a bit of paint, and then I wet the brush, and then I use my index finger and I kind of just flick it across. Then you get this spray of paint across the spot. So where the white lights are, I add more white, and where the red is, I also add a bit more red with this flicking the brush technique. And then on the top part, I also add more Prussian blue micro raindrops. So on the parts where you want to darken, just spray more Prussian blue, and on the parts that you want to lighten, just spray more sky blue. Okay, now this is the final part. I want to add the raindrops kind of just streaming down from the window shield. So what I have to do is just match the colors. So on the top part where the sky is, I just draw this squiggly line downwards in sky blue. And for any parts that I go near the light, I will use the color of the light and continue it. And then for the black part, I use black, and then for the road, I use Prussian blue. So to recap, I draw a line going downwards. It doesn't have to be straight, it's just a little bit squiggly, then in sky blue. And then whenever I'm near the bokeh lights, I will add the color of the bokeh light to continue the line down. Like for example here, these are all the white lights and yellow lights, so I will add white and yellow to continue the line downwards. And then once that part is gone, I will continue the line down in dark blue, Prussian blue with a little bit of Mars black. Each of these lines doesn't have to be the same. You can kind of separate them, or it can be like a single line, but sometimes I like to branch it out into 3 to 4 lines, And then I'm going to do this until the whole canvas is covered. Just remember to match the colors when you're drawing it across the circles, and then this part is actually quite easy. To be honest, I could have ended this painting right here, but I see that's the thing. Knowing when to stop is a skill as well. And I was like, okay, you know what? I haven't had a flower in a long time, so I wanted to kind of insert my signature flower in, but a rose would be too much because the background has a lot of things going on already. So I added a little daisy on the right side of the bottom of the canvas. It doesn't really go, but I feel at this point it's just a signature. I just need to add this little flower looking out, and I like the daisy. I think the daisy is a very underappreciated flower. It's a very simple flower, but it's also it perseveres through a lot of conditions, and it blooms in pretty much everywhere it can go. So I add a little daisy on the right side of the canvas, and it is finished. So I actually like this painting from afar when I bring the camera back. But when I zoom in, I'm still a little bit 50-50 on it. Maybe there's just too many things going on, but it's a rainy day. Anyway, most important thing is I hope you like this painting and you find this tutorial useful. I don't like this enough to sell it, so I'm just going to keep it in the storage, maybe till the next time when I try to practice this technique on other paintings. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.